Good morning. If you're watching this is World History Unit 6. The Enlightenment, Scientific Revolution, French Revolution, English. It's a whole bunch of stuff. Okay. Fill out the notes as you go through this. If you have trouble seeing the board, I know that the PowerPoint doesn't show up well in the video. You can split your screen, put the video on one side and the PowerPoint on the other. That might be helpful, or you can just follow along with the notes and then come back to the PowerPoint later. Whatever works best for you. So we're going to start with the Scientific Revolution, then go into, I think it's the French Revolution, then the Enlightenment. We got a lot to go through today. So, Nicholas Copernicus. Copernicus was the heliocentric theory. Okay, the sun is the center. That's what it means. Helio is Latin for sun. Centric, it's center. Okay, sun is the center of the universe. However, he was mistaken because he thought the planets moved in perfect circles around the sun. Okay, so he had the base of it right, that the sun is the center of the universe, and then went a little sideways. I'm actually going to move the camera a little because I'm going to have to use the whiteboard today. So let's see if we can get this to where you got PowerPoint and whiteboard. That'll probably work. Okay. Questions with Copernicus? Now Kepler. Kepler discovered planetary motion. Okay? How the planets moved. And he discovered this using math. Okay? So math was actually helpful for once. Okay? Orbits were elliptical, not concentric. So they didn't go in circles, they more went in ovals. Okay? So Copernicus is heliocentric. Sun is the center. Kepler. How many of y'all been to the beach before? Okay? And you've been in the water and had seaweed rub up against your leg and you freak out because you think it's an animal. Yeah? Okay. Now, have any of you been to a beach where the water's clear?
Yeah.
Okay, or you've been to the aquarium or something. Or you've had a fish tank with the fake seaweed in it. Okay, how does that seaweed move? Does it just move back and forth, side to side? Does it kind of move in a lazy kind of circle with the water? Okay, that's how the planets move, in those lazy kind of ovals. Okay? Seaweed is also known as kelp. So Kepler had the planets move in that lazy kind of circle. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Then you got Galileo Galilei, or as some of my kids called him a few years back, and it's just stuck in my head since, Gigi. Okay? I don't know why they called him Gigi, but whatever. He used the telescope to prove the heliocentric theory. So it ends up looking something like this. Where's Mark? Okay. You got a pyramid. At the bottom, you got Copernicus. Okay? With his heliocentric theory. None of this, wow, I cannot spell, but whatever. None of this starts without Copernicus. Because Kepler builds on top of what Copernicus did with his planetary motion. Okay, does that make sense? Then Galileo built on top of Kepler and Copernicus by using the telescope to prove this and this. Does that make sense? Okay? Online people, I'll turn you a little bit so you can see. So you have Copernicus at the bottom. Kepler builds on top of what Copernicus did, and then Galileo builds on top of both of them. Online students, there's going to be a lot on the whiteboard today. I'll try to help you keep up, but no promises. It's kind of hard to see what I'm writing from there, but we'll make it work. Okay, Isaac Newton. How many of y'all had fig Newtons before? This is the guy that invented fig Newtons. Totally kidding.
Yeah, no.
You sure? You positive?
Yeah,
Newton's scientific method. Okay? This thing that Mia was complaining about on the first slide, that was Newton. Okay? His main thing, though, was the laws of gravity. How many of you have heard the story of Newton sitting under the tree? Apple falls, hits him in the head, and he discovers gravity. That's kind of like George Washington and the cherry tree, or Lincoln being always honest. It's just a tall tale. But Newton's scientific method, laws of gravity, things like that. He also had laws of motion. All of that was Isaac Newton. Now, William Harvey. I like William Harvey. And we're going to take a little detour here. This one. Today's going to be one of the longest lessons you've had. Sorry. But we're going to take a little side detour, because this lesson has a lot of detours. William Harvey was the personal physician, the personal doctor to the king. Now, first of all, why would the king have a personal doctor?
Because why not?
Okay. How about this? Now, this is a stereotype. This is not true, but it's going to help you understand why the king has a personal doctor. What is the biggest joke that has to do with one of our neighbors to the west? What state neighbors Virginia to the west? Hint, it's West Virginia. What's the biggest joke of West Virginia? Y'all ever heard it? 15 million people, 15 last names?
No.
Okay. What about if your uncle and your brother were the same person?
Oh, inbreeding, no, that's not.
Inbreeding, incest, okay? The gene pool being kind of shallow. Okay, that's the jokes about West Virginia. It's not true about West Virginia. Now, about royalty, the kings, queens, princes, and all that, back in this time period in Europe, 100% true.
Also, kin.
Okay? All the royalty, all the monarchs in Europe at this time were kin to each other. Okay? That's why they had a lot of genetic diseases, and they had personal physicians because they had these weird diseases. Like the czars, the Russian monarchs, they had hemophilia, which is super thin blood. Okay? If they got a bad cut, they could bleed out like that. Okay? The Habsburgs, the Holy Roman Empire, their tongue was misshapen. It's called the Habsburg tongue. It was misshapen and made them sound really weird. Gave them a lot of trouble with like breathing and things like that. I can't remember if it was the British or the French. A bunch of them had a club foot, which is where your foot turns in on itself. Okay? All kinds of genetic diseases. Because they were all kin to each other. And they just kept intermarrying between the different families. Okay? Does that make sense? That's why they had personal physicians. Now, Harvey decided he was going to study human anatomy to try and figure out what was going on with these genetic diseases. His big thing was the circulatory system, the heart. Harvey, heartbeat. Does that make sense? Now, the other way to remember this. Y'all remember the hurricane that hit Houston a few years ago, Hurricane Harvey?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay? Hurricanes move in a circular pattern, all right? Harvey had the circulatory system. Does that make sense to everybody?
So they named it after him?
No.
Oh.
It's just a way to remember it.
Oh, okay.
Okay? He studied anatomy by studying the studying pigs. Because pig anatomy is very similar to human anatomy in a lot of ways. Okay? But yeah, his big thing was the circulatory system. For example, like if you hurt your hand, okay? Like when I was in high school, I played football. One game I caught a face mask right across the back of my hand. Didn't break anything, but it messed up one of the veins. And to this day, this one vein in the back of my hand, it's kind of hard to see from there, but it always stays popped up because it's crushed a little bit up. Like when you tighten a garden hose, and one side puffs up bigger than the other one. Same kind of thing. That's why if you go get blood drawn or go donate blood or something like that, they'll tie off your arm to make your vein pop up so they can draw your blood. Make sense? None of that would have been possible without Harvey's studies back in this time period. All good there? Sweet. Scientific revolutions and emphasis on reason and nature. Formulation of scientific method, expansion of scientific knowledge. Age of absolutism. What's divine right? If you have divine right, who has given you power to rule? It's God. So if you have divine right, who's given you power to rule? Thank you. Y'all are terrible at this. God. Okay? God is divine. So divine right is God has given you the right to rule. Centralization of power with an absolute monarch, they have absolutely all the power. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So this is Louis. Let's talk about this for a second. Look at those legs, man. You got bird legs. Wearing tights. It's like, look at my legs. They look good. But no, they really don't. Anyway, besides the point. Louis XIV was the Sun King. Okay? He was the King of France. He ruled France for 72 years. He built the Palace of Versailles. He got rid of the legislative body. He had absolute power. Okay? Now you have to understand. Roman numerals. If you have the letter I, what number is that in Roman numerals? 1. The letter V is 5, and the letter X is 10. Now, you have IV. Okay, the I is before the V. What number is it?
6. No,
4. Okay, if the I comes before, it's -1. After, +1. That makes sense? So, XIV is what?
15.
No, it's 10
14.
plus 4 is 14.
Oh.
Okay? Later on in this same unit, we have Louis XVI, which is the I on this side. Okay? You have to understand that or you will get them messed up. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the Palace of Versailles. This is what Louis XIV had built. Okay? The Palace of Versailles. Now this is Peter the Great. Okay, Peter the Great was Russian. Okay, he was the Tsar. And you can see Tsar spelled either C-Z-A-R or T-S-A-R. Either way, same word. We good there? Okay. So, up to this point, Russia had become very Eastern culture-wise, okay? Men grew long beards, they wore robes, they ate with their hands. It was very similar to the Middle East, okay? Peter went to Western Europe, to England, the Netherlands, and studied how they were, loved their culture, and wanted to bring it back to Russia. And this was called the Westernization of Russia. It was making Russia like Western Europe. Okay? When Peter did this, he also built St. Petersburg, which became the new capital for a little while. Named it after himself. If the guy's name is in the question, don't get it wrong. Okay? St. Petersburg was Peter the Great. A couple units from now, we'll have the nation of Kenya, which is named after Jomo Kenyatta. You would be amazed how many times people get questions wrong when the answer's in the question. Please don't do that. Please. If you do, I will have to hurt you. Not physically, because that's wrong, but I will hurt you emotionally.
Sounds fair.
Okay? Maybe psychologically.
Sounds fun.
Okay. Rights of Englishmen. So with this, democracy rests on the principle that government derives the power from the consent of the government. Basically, you give the government the right to rule. Okay? The government only has its powers because you guys say, okay, you can have this power as long as you give me my rights. Foundations of English freedoms include the right to a trial by jury. What is that? Okay. Me to kill somebody.
Sounds about right. I'm kidding.
Don't worry about you, kid. Okay, me to kill somebody. When she goes to trial, is the judge going to determine what happens to Mia? No. There's the 13 people on the jury that the lawyers plead the case to, and the jury decides, and they come back with a verdict of guilty or not guilty. Does that make sense? Okay, that's trial by jury. The Magna Carta was 1265, I believe. This was the first document to really kind of put a limit on the power of the king and queen. And then common law is an unwritten law based on a custom or a court decision. Now, I knew a guy. By guy, I mean, this is an older guy, but anyway. He had went off to school, and I'm not giving you details on who this guy is because this is I'm pretty sure he's still alive. And I'm posting this video on YouTube, so I don't want to call him out on the internet. But anyway, older guy. While he was in school, he had went to college for his doctorate. Okay. While he's there, he had a friend he grew up with. I mean, they were like brother and sister, so they were like, okay, let's just get this house together. We'll split the bills, both get our doctorates, and then go our separate merry ways. Okay? That's exactly what they did. They lived together in Pennsylvania. I think it was for like 8 or 9 years while they were going through school, and then went on their own separate paths in life. Down the road, he met his wife, or soon-to-be wife, who was also a doctor. But anyway, besides the point. And they got engaged, went to get married, and the clerk at the courthouse said, "Sir, you're already married." He's like, "No, I'm not." And she said, "Sir, you're married." Because he had lived with this lady for 9 years in Pennsylvania, under common law, they were married. Okay? That's a common law marriage. So then they had to get a common law divorce. But long story short, they got it settled out. He married his wife, and they lived happily ever after. But common law is unwritten law based on a custom or a court decision. It's not written down. Does that make sense? Okay? English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution prompted further development of the rights of Englishmen. Any questions here?
No.
Okay. English Civil War. Okay, I'm going to go through the slides real quick, and then I'll draw up some serial killer handwriting so y'all can understand what's going on here. Good? Y'all excited now? Okay, English Civil War, you had two sides. You had Oliver Cromwell and Charles I. Okay, online kids, guess what? You're going on a field trip. we're going to move you over here so you can see the serial killer handwriting. You don't have to really see the PowerPoint for a moment. So, this is the other wall that you never get to see. So, English Civil War, you have two sides. And I'm going to cut this other light on so we can on switch. So we can see the board a little better. Alright. Two sides in the English Civil War. One side, you have you don't need that anymore. And whatever. You have on one side Charles the First versus Oliver Cromwell. And this is the English Civil War. So, Charles leads an army known as the Cavaliers. I'm going to misspell it. I did misspell it, and that's Carroll County's mascot. I misspelled Cavaliers. That's embarrassing. Cromwell's followers were called the Roundheads. The way to remember this, Mr. Thompson's first name is Charles. Okay? Charles Thompson. Everybody calls him Chuck. That's just because Chuck's shortened version of Charles. Make sense? So, Mr. Thompson is the leader of Carroll County High School. We're the Cavaliers. Super easy to remember. Right? Oliver Cromwell, and O is round. He led the Roundheads. Cromwell wins. Yay! Charles is killed. Okay, so Cromwell takes over for a little while. Then Cromwell dies. Okay? When Cromwell dies, he doesn't have anybody set up to take over after him. He's basically a dictator, and then he dies. Nobody likes him, and they're like, what are we going to do now? What happens is Charles actually had children. Okay? He had 3 kids. He had James, Charles. Actually, we're going to put James right here. Hang on. I completely messed this up. Okay. So he has Charles, James, Mary. Everybody with me? So, when Cromwell dies, Charles II takes power. And this is known as the Restoration. Because the monarch is restored to the throne. It's like your phone, okay? With your phone. When something's going wrong with an iPhone, what do you have to do?
You just reset it down.
You got to restore it. So like with the 7, you hold the power button, hold the volume down button, it powers it off, and then restores it. Right? That's what happens here. The monarch gets powered off and then restored. Make sense? Okay. Then Charles dies. He's not killed or nothing, he just dies. Then power goes to James. This is James I. Now, Parliament did not like James. Okay? Sorry, not James I. My bad. Second. James II was super unpopular. He was super, super Catholic. But here's the problem. James II, he didn't have a wife. He had, bread will be marriages and things like that. James II had a baby mom. Okay? And then they had a child, and we'll call this child Baby B. In honor of what my English history professor called this child at Radford, but I'm not going to tell you guys. Also because I'm on video. But we'll just call him Baby B, and y'all can figure it out from there. I'll trust you. So, problem here is James is Catholic. Okay? Which in turn makes Baby B Catholic. Parliament, who was kind of sort of on the same side as Cromwell, does not like Catholics. Parliament, in turn, does not like James. But here's the problem. Okay? There's a conflict, but they have no way to get rid of James. Mary, by this point, has gotten married. I don't want to draw over the silver here. So she has gotten married to William of Orange. And I really wish I had an orange marker. It'd make this so much better, but whatever. William of Orange. He is Dutch from the Netherlands. Okay? So what happens here is Parliament sends a couple people, sends some representatives, all the way to the Netherlands to ask William to invade England. This would be like, you know how the Democrats hate President Trump right now? Mm-hmm. This would be like the Democrats going to Canada and asking Canada to invade the United States to take out Trump. Okay, that's effectively what happens here. Is Parliament sends people to the Netherlands to ask the leader there to invade England and overthrow the king. Make sense? And he does it. So William invades England and overthrows James II. And this is known as the Glorious Revolution. James decides he needs to flee England. But he's the king, so how does he flee England? If everybody knows what he looks like.
He dresses up. He changes his style.
He dresses up as a woman. Tries to flee England, gets captured, and that's the end of his story. Right there, you have the English Civil War, the Restoration, and the Glorious Revolution, all in one beautiful chart. Does everything make sense? So, I know. And I don't know how to pause the video, so. Hello? Yes. She has not come in this morning. She was here yesterday. Right. No problem. Okay. So, in order to take power here, though, William and Mary, does that sound like a college here in the state of Virginia? William and Mary, it's over in Williamsburg. It's named after these two. William and Mary overthrow James, and then they sign the English Bill of Rights of 1689. And they become William the Third and Mary. King, Queen. Ta-da! British history. Questions here? Okay, we're going on another field trip, guys. Back over to where you originally were. Okay. Oh, which switch was it? Come on. There we go. Okay. English Bill of Rights, that's what I just explained. Gave specific rights to Parliament, placed limits on the King and Queen. Not worried about that. So the Enlightenment believed that human progress was possible through applying scientific knowledge and reason to laws and government. Okay? Enlightenment ideas influenced the leaders of the American Revolution and the writing of the Declaration of Independence. One of Thomas Jefferson's key things here in the Declaration was the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
He stole that from John Locke. Okay? John Locke wrote life, liberty, and property. Jefferson just took it and changed it up just a little bit.
He didn't steal them.
That's still plagiarizing. Okay? Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration, all of this took Enlightenment ideals. The Enlightenment fueled the American Revolution and the French Revolution. So Hobbes, okay, Thomas Hobbes wrote Leviathan, okay, says that humans exist in a primitive state of nature and consent to the government for self-protection. Basically, humans are too dumb and violent to control themselves. Okay? His exact phrase was, without the government, life would be short, brutish, and nasty. Something like that. Okay? Basically, without the government, this would turn into the Hunger Games. And each of y'all would kill each other. Make sense? That's Hobbes. He wants this government to have absolute power. John Locke hates absolute monarchy. People consent to the government for protection of natural rights. Life, liberty, property. So the L's go together, okay? Locke, life, liberty. Does that make sense? Okay, when y'all were learning how to read and everything in elementary school, did y'all ever have to clap out the syllables?
Yes.
Okay, Montesquieu. How many syllables? Montesquieu. 3. How many times does the letter M touch the ground? 3. How many branches of the U.S. government are there? 3. Montesquieu's whole thing was separation of powers. That makes sense? That's why we have 3 branches of government. It's Montesquieu's separation of powers. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, super French. Big influence on the French Revolution. He said the government is a contract between the rulers and the people. Okay? So the main thing with Rousseau is the social contract, French Revolution. Write it with me. Voltaire, letter V. Okay? Voltaire's thing was the separation of church and state. So with the letter V, you have the church on one side, the state on the other. And they're separated. Does that make sense? Everybody with me? Yes? No? Mia, you good?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was looking at the notes and I lost.
French Revolution. So the cause of the French Revolution was Enlightenment ideas and the Americans. Okay, because the French came over, helped us in our revolution, helped us overthrow England, then went back and they still had a king. They decided we want some of that freedom too. And overthrew their king. So you have the storming of the Bastille. Okay, the Bastille was a prison and an armory in France. The people storm the gates, overthrow the Bastille, and that's the beginning of the French Revolution. How we celebrate Independence Day here in America, in France they celebrate Bastille Day, where they overthrew it. Does that make sense? Okay. Other thing is the Reign of Terror. This guy right here is Robespierre. Okay, he was the leader of the Committee of Public Safety. Now this Committee of Public Safety did the exact opposite. They did not keep the public safe. Basically, if someone thought you were against the revolution, you would hear, they'd drag you out of your house, drag you up to the guillotine. Guillotine's this giant blade, okay? They lock you into it, drop the blade, and chop your head off. Just like that. And you better hope you're one of the first ones to get executed on that day. Because they don't clean the blade in between executions. So as they pull it back up, there's blood, flesh, bone, all this baking onto the guillotine all day long. So by the end of the day, it might take 2 or 3 drops of this heavy blade to chop your head off, and you're alive for the whole thing. Does that sound fun?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, sounds like a good time. Okay? But what happens is once they chop your head off, they reach down there, there's a little basket. They pick your head up by the hair, hold it up so the crowd can see it, and then chuck your head into the crowd like a beach ball at a Nickelback concert. Okay? Or they would put your head on a spear and parade it around town. They really hated anybody against the revolution. They killed 500,000 people during the Reign of Terror. Okay? By guillotine. Including King Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette. Outcomes. You have the end of absolute monarchy because Louis gets his head chopped off. This also leads to the rise of Napoleon. Napoleon took over because of the chaos of the French Revolution. Okay, the French Revolution was 10 years of chaos. We'll get to Napoleon not next week, but the week after. So art and technology. You got Johann Sebastian Bach. Okay, Bach was a Baroque composer. The B's go together. Does that make sense? Bach, Baroque. Mozart was classical because there's 2 composers and the B's go together. So Mozart's the only other one. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Let's talk about his name though. Wolfgang. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. That is a strong German name. I think it was actually Austrian. But either way, that's a strong name. We talked about Voltaire. Miguel de Cervantes, Spanish. Okay? He wrote Don Quixote. Don Quixote was the first novel. Okay? This comes from Cervantes. This comes from the Enlightenment. And then you have Eugène Delacroix. Delacroix is French. Okay? The Romantic School of Art. Think Paris. Paris is the city of love, city of romance. Romantic School of Art. Delacroix was the French guy. Make sense?
Yes.
Alrighty. Painting started to depict classical subjects, public events, natural scenes, and portraits. And then we talked about Don Quixote. New technologies. You have all-weather roads. This improves transport and trade. You have new designs of farm tools that increase productivity through the agricultural revolution. And improvements in ship design that lower the cost of transport. Any questions? This was the longest lesson we've had yet. Okay? This one was the big one. This was probably the 3rd biggest unit we have. Other ones are the Cold War and World War II. Are you sure there's no questions? I try to explain it as easy as possible. Online kids, if you're watching this, if you have any questions, y'all know the drill. Leave a comment, shoot me an email, something like that. Let me help you out. You got vocab, you got a test review. You'll have a vocab quiz going live tomorrow. Test will go live Friday. Also, I'm doing tutoring on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Virtual kids, let me know if you need a Google Meet or something so I can explain things for you. You guys need to let me know about one, whether you want to be on the list. B-Day kids, if you're watching this. A, why are you watching this? Because we're going to go over this on Thursday. B, you have tutoring on Thursdays. You just need to let me know about one on Thursday if you want to stay or not. So, have any questions, anything like that, let me know. And I will talk to you guys later on.